It actually happened. Before we get into this, I want to thank everyone who stood with me on the fact that Mario & Luigi wasn't dead. The idea that Alpha Dream going out of business means the series is dead is a baseless claim when Nintendo owns the series, and the series consistently sold well until the remakes. I'm proud of all of us as a community for still believing and getting through those 5 years since the bankruptcy of Alpha Dream. For the past 2 weeks at this point, I've been in a state of denial. I still believed I was dreaming. It was just until a few days ago I finally sat down and rewatched the trailer with an open mind, and I just kinda started tearing up. Anyone who's viewed my content before knows how much the series means to me. I mean, probably almost half of my videos are related to Alpha Dream in some shape or form, but we're not here to talk about the trailer itself. Maybe I'll do a video detailing more about it, but I feel like a lot of other creators did great jobs doing that. Obviously, I think everything we've seen so far is gorgeous and lives up to the standards of Alpha Dream's works. I had a very appropriate and reasonable reaction to the trailer.
What?!
So the big question, who could possibly be developing this? There's a lot of options, even if we narrow things down, although I believe I know who is working on Brothership. For some somewhat depressing context, Alpha Dream went bankrupt in 2019 due to their ever-growing debt. The company had always reportedly been in the red for a long time, since around Dream Team. I really recommend seeing my video relating to what was really going on behind the scenes at Alpha Dream for further insight. In the video, I basically detail the company's issues that led to the start of their debt, but I only recently learned that the workplace issues didn't stop. They still continued into the last years of the company. On a Japanese forum site, basically what seems to be 4chan before Japan, an anonymous user stated at the announcement of Alpha Dream's bankruptcy that there was a personal dispute with a certain Alpha Dream veteran. The same user went on to describe that the employee was treated unfairly by Alpha Dream. This caused said veteran to leave and take several employees, which was around 10 total, roughly half of the core Mario & Luigi staff at the time, to Ilka. This information is all correct, as prior we didn't know that some employees moved to Ilka, we didn't know how Alpha Dream was in the red for a longer time, and so on. Real quickly, I want to mention that we should look at things from Nintendo's perspective here. Nintendo, seeing that half of the Mario & Luigi staff left Alpha Dream due to employees not being treated the best, would likely not want to continue directly working and supporting Alpha Dream financially. Half of the people who worked on Mario & Luigi were gone, and the company was in an absurd amount of debt even back in 2018. There just wouldn't be as much of a reason to financially support them at that point. I've heard a bit more about what 2019 was like for Alpha Dream, and I might do a separate video on the last year of the company, but it was disgusting to say the least. I had believed Alpha Dream grew as a company after the events of the development of Dream Team, but from my knowledge it wasn't good in 2019 at all either. While all of this hurts to hear, I feel at ease. I'm glad that there's finally proper closure to this company and we know to an extent what the hell was going on. The other half of the Mario & Luigi devs, and in general the rest of Alpha Dream staff, all completely split amongst different companies. Only about 1 or 2 at a specific company compared to roughly 10 at Ilka, with more former employees possibly working there that we don't know about. Notably, Shunsuke Kobayashi, the director of Paper Jam and the remakes, is at Ilka. But who exactly is Ilka? This is very important to really know, as people generalize Ilka as a developer who quote-unquote fumbled making the Diamond and Pearl remakes, which couldn't be any more inaccurate. Ilka is a video game company of almost 400 people with 7 different offices. The company started out as primarily a CG studio doing things like cutscenes for games, and they have since expanded into game development where they first assisted on games and then went on to create their own games like the Diamond and Pearl remakes, the Idolmaster Starlit Season, Sandland, and One Piece Odyssey. While the last 3 games I just mentioned aren't the greatest games out there, it's not a Diamond and Pearl remake situation. BDSP was likely a result of crunch from the Pokemon company, as their other games are much better looking and aren't as lackluster. I'll touch more on this topic later, but don't judge a company based on one game alone, especially when it has several divisions. Anyways, quite a few employees went to assist on Fantasian, made by Mistwalker, but in Minmax's interview with Chihiro Fujioka, it seems to be a more so contract job rather than a full-time thing working at the company, so I doubt many of those employees actually moved to Mistwalker. Hiroyuki Kubota, who directed Bowser's Inside Story and Dream Team, went to Monolith Soft, and he and one other employee were the only ones who went there. There's also only one employee who went to Nintendo to work at the Zelda team. To the people who are doing it, please stop spreading blatant misinfo that a lot of employees went to either of those companies, because they didn't from what we know based off game credits. A lot of employees from Alpha Dream did not go to Nintendo nor Monolith Soft. So what are our main options here for who's making the game? I think we've answered it already. Nintendo already confirmed former Alpha Dream employees are involved in Brothership, and the employees who are still in the industry that aren't split up are at Ilka. But before I get into more of why I think it's Ilka, I want to rule out some other possibilities people have had. Firstly, Next Level Games, known for Luigi's Mansion and Mario Strikers. I would say they're a good candidate if not ILCA. I've seen some people claim that a lot of people involved in Luigi's Mansion 3 weren't involved in Strikers Battle League, which could suggest those employees were getting a head start to work on Brothership. But from what I've seen, that's complete misinfo, and looking into things with the help of Moby Games, there's not much staff who have been credited on Luigi's Mansion 3 and not Battle League. And for the ones who were, I was able to confirm the majority of them just moved to another studio. Battle League came out in only 2022, and it took them 2.5 years to make a game like that with a much smaller scale. I think it'd take them a lot longer to make a new Mario & Luigi game. Next, let's talk about Grezzo. They're known for the Switch port of Miitopia and the remaster of Link's Awakening. This one is pretty simple. They're most definitely the studio behind Echoes of Wisdom. Then there's Camelot, who's the primary developer for the Mario sports games, being tennis and golf. While it has been 3 years now since Super Rush, I think considering the size of their studio, less than around 40 people total, they'd focus more on smaller scale games, like obviously the Mario sports games. I wouldn't be surprised if we're getting the next tennis game in 2025 for the next system. Then there's Monolith Soft. Monolith Soft has around 260 employees, but let's break it down more. There are 3 main production teams within a Monolith. The first one has a majority of the staff and works on the main Xenoblade games, their last project being the DLC for Xenoblade 3 back in 2023. I don't think it's possible this team is making it, as they're likely working on the next Xenoblade game considering their comments about it. The second team within Monolith Soft has been insisting on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom as a support studio, and I think they'll likely continue to help on more grand Nintendo games, and I'm predicting the next 3D Mario game will be one of those. Then there's the third team, which is another support team which is assisted on EPD5's games, which are Splatoon and Animal Crossing games. Usually, EPD2 assists on the Mario & Luigi games, and I see that being the case with Brothership, but I could definitely also see this team assisting development on it. But I doubt the studio could be the primary developer for it. Next is Goodfeel, which a lot of people believe for good reason because they worked on the Giant Battles and Dream Team. They have around 130 employees as of 2024 and recently made Peach Showtime back in March. If Peach Showtime released in 2023, I would say it's a lot more likely they developed it, but considering it was just a few months ago and they released a Japan-exclusive 3D action game late last year, I doubt it could have been Goodfeel. Then there's Intelligent Systems. I've heard some people suggest it, but I don't really think it's possible. I doubt Nintendo would give them 2 Mario RPGs as they're already doing Paper Mario. They have 2 main teams from my understanding, their Fire Emblem team, which is the only possible option, but I really doubt it, and their Paper Mario/WarioWare team. WarioWare seemingly shares staff from the Paper Mario team, and I believe some of the Fire Emblem team. Intelligent Systems has a little less than 200 employees, and a lot of rumors suggesting that the next Fire Emblem game, which is likely a remake, is coming sooner than later. So I really don't see it being Intelligent Systems. Lastly, it's a good thing to bring up that Nintendo could internally be developing this at one of their EPD teams. For anyone unaware, EPD is Nintendo Entertaining Planning and Development, which is just Nintendo's internal development studios consisting of 10 teams. As I said earlier, EPD2 is practically guaranteed to be assisting on Brothership, as they have assisted on all the series entries in the past as a support studio. We can also rule out EPD 1 and 6 as they're also support teams. Easily, we can get rid of EPD 3, 5, 8, and 10 for obvious reasons, such as just sticking to the series they've been working on, like the 3D Mario team and other teams having games released recently, like EPD 10 and Mario Wonder. We've gotten hints that Metroid 6 is likely in development, so we can presume that EPD 7 isn't involved. EPD 4 focuses on more casual and experimental games, so we can also rule them out. EPD 9 works on Mario Kart and ARMS, and while they're most likely working on the next Mario Kart, they're the only team I'd say could be a possibility. But I still doubt Nintendo's primarily internally developing Brothership. Now let's talk more about ILCA. As I said, many are hesitant about the company because they were the main developers of Pokemon BDSP, which was seen as a lackluster remake of the original Pokemon Diamond and Pearl with a not so well received art style. BDSP alone is a lot different from their other games. It's speculated they could have had a much grander vision for the remake as suggested by a lot of concept art, but wasn't simply given the time or resources. There was even data mined scrapped content relating to Pokemon Platinum, one of the main criticisms of the game for not including. It was also revealed the game only had a development cycle of 1.5 years, which was definitely not a reasonable amount of time, especially considering development started right when COVID hit. This is all me just saying, don't judge a studio based off of one game where they were likely chained back from the Pokemon company. Besides, if you really have that big of an issue with that game, those developers likely migrated into a new side studio within ILCA called Pokemon Works. In fact, a similar scenario happened back in 2022 where ILCA and Bandai Namco formed Bandai Namco Aces, a studio dedicated to working on Ace Combat games. Which, if you don't know, that studio is currently working on the next Ace Combat game and is the only upcoming ILCA game we know about for a company that has almost 400 employees. It's likely another one of those mini studios within a studio will open up, but for Mario and Luigi if ILCA is behind Brothership. But let's bring some more evidence to the table that might suggest ILCA is working on Brothership. Like I mentioned before, ILCA started out as just a CG company and is filled with a lot of people from that field. What does Mario and Luigi Brothership seem to have a lot of? Cutscenes. From the opening of the trailer itself, to the brothers launching themselves onto the cannon, the part with Bowser and the new villain, etc. In general, there are a lot of good looking animations, and while this might seem like a stretch, it's a huge detail in my opinion when considering who could be making this. A big point is that just a bit ago, Nintendo confirmed that some of the developers from the Mario & Luigi series are involved in the game. And where did the majority of those developers wind up? ILCA. The rest of the employees who didn't retire got completely split up amongst the industry. Again, like I mentioned earlier, Shinsuke Kobayashi, the director of Paper Jam and the remakes, is at ILCA, and specifically just worked on their recent game, Sandland, for quality assurance support. I don't know about you, but that credit for a game screams working on a different game, Brothership, but also assisting on a game in a smaller role on the side also. And if you're hesitant about Mr. Kobayashi because he directed one of the more generic Mario & Luigi games, don't be. Seriously. He's been working on the series since Partners in Time and discussed in interviews about how they had drafts of a more complex story for Paper Jam, but things just got too complex and too messy. Honestly, I feel like Alpha Dream's financial state may have played a part in here, as they could have been taking too long to create a detailed plot, so they just settled for something more simple to reduce the risk of wasting more time and money. Mr. Kobayashi also did a great job with the story in Bowser Jr.'s journey, and while the gameplay was mediocre, the story and writing was great. There's also a good chance Alpha Dream's COO, then later CEO, Yoshihiko Maekawa, is involved in the game considering he supervised the Mario RPG remake. A little detail I also noticed, which is so small I don't really think it counts as evidence really, is that the estimated file size for Brothership is 10 gigabytes, and it's definitely not going to be that much. And this same thing happened with BDSP. Its estimate was 10 gigabytes and it ended up being around 6.7 gigabytes. Lastly, I did make a few tweets about how I said I had quote-unquote full confirmation it was ILCA, and while I thought I had more evidence to suggest it, what I heard originally was a mistranslation as it was something about a cancelled original ILCA game which I was also able to later confirm existed. What I've heard though is 100% confirmation that ILCA is working on an AARPG releasing in the next 12 months. And Mario & Luigi Brothership is an AARPG releasing in the next 12 months, so we're really narrowing this down here if that isn't good enough confirmation. Before we wrap this video up, I want to talk about why. Why do I want to know this so badly? Why do I care so much? And that is a really good question. I don't blame you for asking. I'm not trying to quote-unquote prove this game is being made by ILCA because I think the game is going to be bad. It's reasons like that which is why Nintendo chooses not to reveal developers before the game releases. I'll say it for the 50th time, ILCA has great games outside of BDSP. And even then, BDSP isn't as bad as people make it out to be at times. I want to know who's developing the game because I am an incredibly curious person. Literally look at my other videos, and I have dedicated a lot of this channel to researching and trying to figure out what the hell went on in Alpha Dream's past because I have been way too curious about what went down. And this isn't like figuring out who's making a game like Peach Showtime or Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. This is figuring out who's reviving your favorite game series of all time and continuing it from now on. This means a lot more to me. Overall, I think ILCA is making Mario & Luigi Brothership due to things like the amount of employees that moved there, studio's history with CG, and their next game being an AARPG. I am incredibly excited for Mario & Luigi Brothership, and I plan on making a lot more videos about the game in the future. And thank you so much for watching it, and make sure you pre-order Brothership because we need this game to succeed as much as the Thousand Year Door remake and the Mario RPG remake are. There's no way this game could flop because of the Switch's massive install base, but we should want the game to sell as much as the other two are because we need Nintendo to know we want this series to continue. I'll see you all in the next video.